Awesome. And we are live. Thank you, everyone, for joining me. It was great to be joined by Q. Q, thanks so much. You are people leader at Airbnb, so we can hear about that stuff. And I think we've been trying to do this podcast for a while, and I think if we did it a month ago, we wouldn't have been speaking about COVID. But I think now, there's been quite a bit going on. And as you were asking me off air, half of my family got COVID.
Oh, wow.
So my wife and my older kid, and then me and my younger one were fine. It's weird.
Wow, that's crazy. It's good. Yeah, no, thanks for having me. I'm glad we finally were able to connect live, because the time zones always make it challenging, along with both of us having kids, newborns.
Yes,
It's definitely changed our lives a little bit for the better.
you always say that. Well, I was anyway. That when you have a kid, it never changes your life until it comes.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're like, what happened?
Yeah, that's I think one of the few things I've learned having a kid, which relates to work and kind of the people side of people, is how you have to have a level of resilience and patience, and also deal with the fact that you cannot control everything and plan well, which goes really kind of in a weird way in terms of how organizations have to prepare now for a new world where you can't have a plan. You could have a plan, you return to office in Jan, Feb, whatever date it is, but things go astray. You have to be patient, resilient, and deal with it. And having a child is in a weird way, very much like that.
It's even harder. I mean, it depends. But, it's like, the minute this is one thing I've really learned to try. I'm trying to learn to do. Is not tell them not to do something, because the minute I say don't do something, obviously they want to go do it.
Yeah.
And I can't help. You just switch into this thing of like don't or something. You try not to raise your voice. You're trying to be calm and relaxed, but it's the 20th time you've said it.
Yeah.
And then it's interesting. And then obviously with all this couple of years of lockdown. I mean, I'm in London, and you're right. San Francisco, right? Yeah. So it'd be interesting to hear. But from London, and we've been in and out of lockdown. Over the last few years, homeschooling a bit. My wife was working in intensive care with COVID, so my kids could go to school. So we were dropping them off, but everything changed. That was 2020. 2021 is still going, but I mean, a lot's happened this year. I mean, what's been your? It's a tough question, but what's been your highlight of the year so far?
I mean, I think on the personal front, it's having my first kid, having no idea what we're doing every day, but learning and learning to kind of deal with the change and grow with the times. On the professional front, I think it's a little bit of, I guess I would blend both of them a little bit too. So prior to having a kid, I have been one of those individuals that loved working 18-hour days. That's what I thrived. That's what really got me energized, motivated on the personal front too. So it actually forced me to develop a work-life balance because of the fact that I have to focus on my kid. And it does take a level of energy out of me, so I cannot do what I used to do. So I think that's good. But so I think on a blended front, it's basically focusing on work-life balance in a COVID remote world, while we are trying to help our employees and organizations also figure out the right work-life balance. So it's kind of been, I think, work-life balance. Maybe it's taken a whole new meaning for me having a kid, but also in remote world, it's kind of a double whammy almost in that front.
Did it take you a while to get used to not working 18 hours a day? Because I don't know about you, but I was in. Go for it. Yeah.
Yeah, it did. I mean, I think it was, and I would say for the first 6 weeks, I actually took off, so I didn't work much. But when I came back, I think it was the harder part for me was getting true to myself that I cannot keep up with it, because I was trying to do the 18-hour days and also trying to make sure I did the morning feed for my son, for example, because me and my wife were splitting stuff up. And I realized my body would just shut down. So it was a very humbling experience, because in the past, in my life, I've been able to power through stuff, even if it's all-nighters for work, and just get it done because there was a goal inside. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the multidimensional fatigue mentally, physically, with having a kid that does cause a level of drain, exhaustion, that I quickly realized if I don't change my habits, I'm just going to collapse at some point, because it's not sustainable. So I did not, to answer your question, I did not adapt right away, but life and my overall being a human aspect of being fatigued quickly taught me that I was just in a grumpy bad mood if I was not gonna be focused on that. So I had to adapt, is the short answer of it. I didn't come off the bat, and I'm still learning. And I have team members who've had kids and direct reports and team members, and I'm learning so much from them as well on how they adapted, because this is a journey for myself, in terms of that transformation.
And were you doing 18 hours in the office pre-COVID? So did you have to adjust to like working at home, plus you had the kid, plus?
Yeah, not as much. It was a blend of home and office, more home because the nature of my role is fairly global. So I would have early morning calls or evening calls with APAC. So I was in the office probably pre-COVID 3 to 4 days a week. So it was not every day, but I would not be staying the 18 hours. So I would come home, and I had a habit of working at home already. Over the last decade, I would say at least 1 day a week, and evenings and nights, I wouldn't necessarily stay in the workplace. So that level of flexibility, I think, was there. I think the COVID times is basically for folks like myself who worked a lot anyways. Having my desk like 4 feet, 5 feet from my bed meant like you could turn on and off work in a second, which is good, but also really bad for people like me because I didn't know when to shut off, and I would just keep going. And obviously, our organization, as you know, Airbnb was in a tough spell in 2020 when COVID hit because our business literally stalled. We had to adapt, we had to change, we had to restructure, coming out the other end to IPO at the end of the year. So it was a really tough time with a lot of work to do. And then when you don't have to commute and you're in work you literally teleport you don't even need to teleport yourself. You walk yourself in 4 steps to your desk. It's a change that definitely required a lot more self-discipline than I had before. And then you couple that with a kid, and it's just like, self-discipline needs to be there, or I'm just not going to succeed on either front, is what I learned pretty quickly.
It's good. A lot of people were working to live, pre-COVID. It was like work, live off. And now, like you've described, a lot of people are thinking about, not working. You don't want to work to live. It's like, well, living to work. Sorry. It needs to be a bit more of a balance, Even exercise, good nutrition.
Yep.
I mean, if you're working at home, it's so easy not to go out.
Yeah.
Like so easy, right?
Yeah.
And then, so I've been throughout. I put the gym in my diary, like it's the most important meeting of the day. Yeah. A lot of people I spoke to were doing fake commutes to work, so they'd make a cup of tea and they'd go for a walk around the block, 20 minutes, half an hour.
Yeah.
Things like that were quite nice.
Yeah, definitely. I've, fortunate enough in San Francisco, because I was in Chicago for 16 years before I moved to San Francisco, and the weather is a lot different, where Chicago is like sub-zero for like a few months of the year. Thankfully, San Francisco is a lot more walkable. So I've actually tried, I think only since COVID started, trying to go on an hour-long walk every day. I don't make it every day, maybe 3 to 4 times a week, but I try to aim for it every day. And sometimes if I just need to do it, I'll take a call on my walk. So I don't, I'll switch up. I've started now only recently trying to switch up Zoom with audio when it's okay, like if it's a one-on-one and I'm just catching up with one of my reports, because one of the things that's been kind of a tactical, but really, really a real impact of COVID is on our eyes, and how much Zoom fatigue mentally is one thing, but visually, like I didn't have glasses till the pandemic. Now I've got reading glasses, or as my doctor calls it, computer and phone glasses, because all we've been doing is staring at a screen, and I need it. So, and that leads to things like exhaustion, headaches. So now it's only recently where I'm like, do I need to be in a video call? Sometimes you do, and majority of my calls are still video. But I try to switch it up with audio calls so that you can get some fresh air, and really like there is no balance otherwise. You're on 20-hour Zoom calls, and it's just.
Do you know, it's funny. I was reading an article, and there was a psychiatrist who was writing an article in Financial Times about the feeling one gets after a Zoom call or a video call, and they likened it to like almost like depression, where it's like you feel really drained.
Yeah.
Like if when you meet someone like a friend, whatever, colleague, face to face, live, it's so energizing.
Yeah.
You have a good chat, and you're like, Whereas you could still have a great chat on video, but it's quite, I don't know, it's odd. It's like you feel a bit more drained.
Yeah.
From it.
It is. I think it's drained also when you amplify that with the fact that general social connection has been deprived through the pandemic for rightful reasons such as social distancing and all the right protocols. But if you look at the output of that, is there's deprived social human in person, like just connection in person or whatever. The in person leads to kind of what you're mentioning in terms of connection.
Yeah.
You couple that with even your work, even if I didn't have a social life, as an example, for weeks when I was working, I at least interacted with people at work in person, and that was an in person social. And humans are, I mean, we need human interaction to evolve and energize. Yeah.
Well, I'm doing my first podcast or video cast in the metaverse at the end of Jan.
Oh wow!
So I've got my Oculus 2s coming. Yeah. I've got my friend who works at Facebook, and we're doing a thing. So our avatars are going into I forget the room. They have a workspace. I can't remember what it's called.
Got it.
Something workspace.
Yeah.
And if you stick it into YouTube, you can find it. It looks pretty cool. You can actually take your devices into the virtual world with you.
Wow!
So you can take your laptop, so you can answer your messages and everything. But I mean, I was telling my team, like, watch this space. 3 to 5 years time, we'll be meeting in our virtual.
Yeah.
But so it's going to be interesting to see. I mean, that's a lot of virtual stuff. This face to face is going to start maybe to wind down. I don't know. We'll see. I mean, in London.
Yeah.
Everything was kind of getting back to normal a bit. I'll say actually it's not normal because normal's gone.
Yeah.
But whatever the new vibe was going to be.
Yeah.
And this new variant, the streets are dead, Christmas parties are cancelled, mates' Christmas lunches cancelled.
Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting. I think interested to hear your kind of your trends maybe for next year, but I think the last month or so, things have really evolved a bit for me.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think on Europe, it's kind of one could say potentially ahead of what's gonna come here. Who knows? But like in terms of the new variant, like you guys got, you're kind of going. I was reading last night, Netherlands has gone into a lockdown, and all the surrounding countries, because it's so close in some ways, right? In the US, I mean, I guess it's interesting because in San Francisco, things have been, I wouldn't say back to normal, but relatively open for the past few months or so. And we still haven't hit the new variant hasn't hit us in the sense where we need to lock down yet. But that said, San Francisco is quite a bubble in the US space. Like I look at US as almost like the EU, and then you have states that are
same population.
So, there's very possible that there are states like, I don't know, Texas, Florida, wherever the vaccine rates are pretty low, that they're heading for potentially what's coming for in Europe already. In San Francisco, we got the booster shots already. We've been very strict, thankfully, in terms of anyone who wants to go indoors has to show vaccine cards or they cannot enter indoors. And that's been like that for 6 months. So San Francisco, the minute we opened back up at the end of summer, it was very strict on vaccine cards needed. And we got boosters. So, we may be in a bubble and the weather's relatively conducive.
It's
so
nice as well.
Outdoors with
and were you back in offices or?
No, so Airbnb, we took an early stance earlier this year in March or April of this year. And initially, our initial stance when COVID hit was we were going to be work from home till September of 2021, which was in 2020. We made that stance.
Oh, right. Okay.
And the reason we did that full year was, because by the time we actually announced it was summer, because first few months of COVID, March, April, May, people were just like, what is going on, right? Like trying to deal with the business change of it too.
Yeah.
So in summer of 2020, we said we will go back to work in September of 2021. And one of the reasons that we did that was we wanted to be cognizant of school schedules and people actually, moving and then not having to, with kids having, or just loved ones having that level of certainty for the period you could provide. But earlier this year in April, maybe of 2021, we actually extended that into September of 2022. And we were one of the few companies that said, we're going to push this out another year. And our thought process was, we don't really know which way the world is going to go. We don't really know what's going to happen, and we don't want to have people disrupt their lives and move back. Like when we did this, a lot of companies, including a lot of the FANGs, were saying come back in September. And we did not want to necessarily have everyone move back or relocate, thinking we were going to open in the office when we were not sure ourselves on what was going to happen. So we gave that additional 1 year runway. Hindsight's always 2020. So to your point, the Apples of the world or who said we would come back in September, moved it to Jan, and then in Jan, now they're like either March or what, they're pushing it out. So it just depends. It's really interesting. So to answer your question, I haven't stepped into an office since March of, I guess, end of Feb 2020, because we actually shut down a week before the city shut down in March, because we just had we knew, like, we wanted to be more conservative and not do that.
So essentially, that's crazy. So essentially, you've been operating as a fully remote global company for the past almost 2 years.
Coming up on 2 years, and
how have you done that? I know you're people operations and talent, so you're obviously been central to it. I'd be interested to hear how what you've done around like the culture, because culture is like number one on people's list right now. You've got how have you maintained that?
So I'll start off with, like, we haven't cracked the code. It's a continuous iteration and evolution of trying stuff, but we have been, I think the difference is now you have to be very intentional, because there is no water cooler chat. So in person, hey, let's grab breakfast because we're in the office kind of thing. That's not there, right? So we've tried to do it programmatically, from having a lot of events, even though they're virtual, from like things like fireside chats to Q&As to, I still remember, because this was a memorable experience, the day we went IPO, we had our own version of morning show, where it was all virtual, but all the employees were able to react. Couple employees were anchors of the show, and
nice.
So I think in a lot of ways, it's doing a lot of intentional virtual programming to drive engagement in a variety of ways. But that said, we know that's not enough, right? So, like to our point earlier, like you can get across virtually probably 80. I think what we learned is, especially for leaders who are anti-work from home in their profession, what we learned through the pandemic is you can definitely be productive virtually, but the engagement and connection and feeling like you are part of the kind of thread is hard to get 100% virtually. So, I think to be seen what level of hybrids overused, so it's probably not the right word, but what version of blended approach is our new future of work going to be? Because I think you have to be very intentional, and I do think, like, companies that have already made the intentional decision to be remote completely, right? Because some companies, it works for their model. I think even those companies, I think in due time, if they haven't decided already, will still meet in person, like once a year or once a quarter or whatever the right cadence is. Because I think no matter how the world ends up, and hopefully, fingers crossed, like this can happen in the near future, is there can be micro moments of in-person meeting to give that social recharge and connection, and then you can work off remotely. So we hope to do that, I guess, in the future, but we've taken our time to say we're going to see how the world plays out and then play ourselves accordingly into the world, which is why we haven't made any like strong stances aside from everyone's work from home. We did do one thing, I think it was last month or in the near past, which was, some people don't have sustainable working conditions in their house. So for example, if I had 3 kids and I'm in a 2-bedroom, like that, I'm right now, my workstation is now in my son's nursery, but he's in daycare 5 days a week. So we get to share the room. If I did not have that luxury, or my internet was not speed, whatever the right sustainable condition may be, we are trying to open it up on a very limited basis to just those individuals. That will provide a workspace, but it's not necessarily going to provide the connection, because they're going to be relatively in an empty office or, distance pretty hard. So, we're still trying to figure that out. It's going to be interesting how it evolves.
It will be interesting if you end up in some virtual workspaces.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think it's all, as you said, it's all TBC. I mean, personally, love connection, love meeting
yeah,
people face to face. And some people are starting to meet me in London, and I have
yeah,
done for a while.
yeah.
My team are mostly virtual in different
Okay.
countries, US, Europe, and stuff. But as I speak to them, they all want some kind of, and we've been planning like regular meetups, and then it gets pushed
Yeah,
back because of the
yeah,
COVID rules, and like the people didn't come over in December, and then you can't. And
yeah.
I was going to go to America in Jan. Hopefully, I still can,
Got it.
but who
Yeah,
knows?
I just never know.
Um,
Yeah,
so yeah, I've had a lot of people, and I'm sure you've had many more.
yeah,
That we've hired and onboarded virtually,
yeah.
and
Same.
what's been interesting is the experience. I think for me, it's like the employee experience. Like, what is your experience working at my firm, your firm, like your day-to-day experience? And I think that people have to be spot on now.
Yeah, I think you have to really be intentional. So if it's onboarding, for example, right? Like we quickly pivoted to having a remote onboarding in terms of the same programming that we do, but you can't do everything, right? Like you can't volunteer at a food bank together as your start class, because that's just not feasible in
No,
today's world. So I think it's continuing to do what we can within the world letting
of
us do
course.
it, for lack of better words, but
Yeah.
continuing to evolve to but I think safety is the number one thing. So I think it's definitely a tough trade-off, because we always want to be safe first, provide safety first, but what level of it's just a whole new level of responsibility,
Oh,
accountability for
it's
people.
so crazy. I mean, you speak to some people and they're like, "What's the problem? Let's go."
Yeah, yeah,
Then you speak to others and they're more anxious, and it's so the one thing I've had to really learn, I think, is just appreciating everyone's going through a different experience. And
yeah,
some people are really anxious, others are like, let's go,
yeah,
I don't mind, take a test, great, let's crack on
yeah,
with life.
yeah,
And you got all of these people, you got all of the people in the middle, and then it's trying to create an experience that is good for everyone. And I think
yeah,
then you move to just ask people what they want, and there's no
yeah.
one size fits all.
Yeah,
I think
definitely. I
ultimately,
think, going back to the basics of just doing a pulse check, even if it's a survey. And when I say survey, I don't mean like 100-question lengthy survey. It could be like, it could be something like a small, like 5-question weekly, monthly survey with emojis as responses, just to see how people are feeling, like where do they want to go, and how can you then evolve into what you want your future work to be, because no one knows the answer. We're in this like really interesting time in our lives, which is no one knows the answer. And for HR specifically, or the people kind of team, it's specifically a unique time, because the canvas has been pretty much like it's open and
oh,
blank,
it's
and we have a way to
amazing for
we
you,
have
yeah.
it's great, but it's also, when you take a hard stance on something and you want to make sure you can do it. I think it's really not beneficial to fight what the world is letting us do, and kind of trying to evolve with it. And what we don't know, we don't know, and being transparent about it, saying we want the feedback to build this new way of working together, because we recognize it's no longer HR rolling out a program. This is like, how are we going to change the way the world? How are we going to change our world in the macro sense of the world itself evolving? So it's pretty
Yeah.
interesting, but I do hear you. I think we have to like listen to our employees. There's one thing has been pretty clear in this pandemic era is one size does not fit all. And
Yeah.
traditionally HR would roll out programs, and in a lot of ways we had to make it fit one size fit all, because you do need a level of consistency and equitable practices. So it should be one size fits all in some form or the other. But that's becoming increasingly challenging, because to your point, and when you're a global company, even vaccine distribution is not equitable in the world. So how do you make that everything has to be so nuanced.
Oh, I mean, education, and yeah, it's funny. It's you grow up on Disney movies, where there's always a happy ending to things, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
then you realize, look, life's not fair. The
yeah,
world isn't fair, never
yeah,
will be.
yeah,
And like talking, just kind of circling back to that to being a parent, it got me really thinking about it, because I've got three daughters,
yeah,
and I want them to grow up
yeah,
thinking they're like dreaming huge,
yeah,
literally they can be the best that they can be,
yeah,
and that things aren't stacked against them,
yeah,
stacked against them.
yeah,
But also, the world isn't fair and people have different skills and they can run faster. So I've really thought carefully about it, because I always have this thing in my mind, and someone told me it's like you always try and unlearn what your parents taught you, and you don't want to be that parent, you know. So it's just, I know, slight side point, but I think it's an important point. It's, you know, just once the penny drops that, you know, things aren't fair all the time.
It's
and it probably never will. You just gotta work hard and crack on.
Work through it. I think, you know, agility has always been a trait that's been a key to success, but I think it's been amplified in the pandemic. Like, if you can't be agile and adapt, and I would say the new dimension, not the new, but the added dimension that's got emphasis in the pandemic is humility, right? Like, to your point, like really understanding, like, even like when I had to like figure out my work-life balance, I was like, this is going to break me. Like, I'm not a superhuman. I'm a human at the end of the day. You have to like get that humility, and that extends to building programs at work for people practices, that extends to personal life. But it's like we have to know what we don't know, or know if the world is not fair and there are distributed practices. You know, we can't you can have a common workplace philosophy or policy, but it's kind of useless if geographically that's not even attainable, because some countries are in a different spot with variants or policies or distribution, whatever the right socio-economic impact, you know, you have to factor that in. So really, humility, I think, is one that, you know, comes to mind, like just in terms of a recent thing that I have to keep reminding myself, being humble with my team. Hey, we don't know this stuff. Let's try to figure it out. It's not, you know, back in the day, it would be, which is like 2 years ago, which is not even that crazy back in the day. It was like, we've done this before. We know what works. Let's weigh out the pros and cons and let's roll it out. Now it's like a lot of stuff has not been done before. This is the playbook we're creating.
Yeah. But, you know, also, I don't know about you, I always felt like the caricature, like, best business person was the one that knew everything, was tough, was the, you know, 20 hours a day, whatever, but just, you know, like that kind of, and I'm going to say old school, you know, mentality of what a good business person is. I think this last couple of years, you know, I talk a lot about, you know, kindness. A lot of people talk about kindness, you know, just being human, not knowing everything, and going through these things where none of us have ever gone through them before. I think I'm seeing more people, more leaders, more managers realizing that, you know, life's short. Be nice to people, be kind, you know, set them up for success, and good things happen. I think more people are realizing that now.
I agree. I think, you know, there were probably a subset of us where that's how we operated, but the other subset, I think they quickly learned through this last year or two in the pandemic that even if they had all the business experience, had all the right skills, like in terms of making the decisions, even that decision was often overturned or challenged because the world turned on us, right? So I think just the fact that maybe some had it and some got trained pretty quickly in a year to know that no matter what they were, and you know, it's not like they were wrong. It's just that the world is also changing. So you have to accept when you're wrong and change and adapt to it, versus pushing for that same decision, you know, in a relatively non-humble way, for lack of better words.
And it catches up with you. I've spoken to, you know, I speak to many people doing what I do. And early on, you know, a lot of businesses cut really early. You know, you remember back in the day, 2020, people cut like just no question. And it was the same in the financial crisis. And then these people realize, you know, the companies are loyal to their shareholders, not to me. And they remember. The ones that behaved really well and looked after their staff, again, people remember. And you've got this great resignation now. And I'm adamant it's a great resignation from bad companies, bad cultures, bad companies. People are a bit fed up, I think, working in or for people that don't value them.
I think there's definitely a piece to what you mentioned, but from my perspective, I think the great resignation is also in some ways like, maybe what's the right word? Maybe like a great reshuffling is another word, because I think, you know, the dimension you mentioned is completely right. It's no longer what you do, it's who you work for and how you align with the flexibility, the values. So that's one piece of people just like now making their own choice. But I think the market's actually pretty, at least of what I see, like there is a lot of job opportunities there. People are just choosing to resign and potentially find something else that's a better fit. So it's kind of like almost like a reshuffle. In some ways, one could argue, if I take a very extreme view, it's healthy for the organization because you're actually finding people that are more going to be energized and productive because they align to, because not all organizations can meet all employees' needs perfectly, right? So in some ways, the reshuffle may be like, the world's way of like making sure people are happy where they are, because now it's more of an emphasis on them. So yeah, it's resignation, but hiring's crazy. And, there are, I keep hearing of people, the great bailing, which is like even candidates, after they're getting offers, are getting so many offers that they sometimes bailing on offers they have, or they're pulling out of the process because they have that opportunity. So I don't know. It's really interesting. Yeah.
Oh, it's so interesting. Those recruitment topics. I mean, you just have to scroll through LinkedIn, right? I mean, it's about, long interview processes people hate.
Yep.
Feedback, ghosting, multiple offers. I had someone call me, or they DM'd me actually. What do? I accepted an offer.
Yep.
She was unemployed, accepted an offer.
Okay.
But 2 days later, company B, who she was interviewing with, came in with an offer that was like 20% more, and she wasn't earning a huge amount of money.
Got it.
What do I do? That was her question. So I stuck it on LinkedIn as a poll.
Oh, I remember seeing that.
And I thought, quite interesting, because you've got on the one side, your word is your bond. Without your word, what are you?
Yeah.
And then on the other side, you've got companies not going to look after you, so look after yourself.
Yeah.
And actually, more people said withdraw from the first offer and take the second offer.
Yeah,
which is quite interesting.
Yeah, it's definitely new times, right? Because I could see both sides of this, but it's so challenging, especially.
It's interesting, but I think you're right. I think companies are having to work really hard to get people. They're also working hard to keep people.
Yep.
And there are a huge amount of open jobs at all levels, but still high unemployment. I'd love to see countries retrain people better. We've never been very good at that.
Yeah.
We train people to get, to fill the jobs, the vacancies that, or even, people are in different, in a different team, maybe they could move it. I think you just need to think a bit more creatively.
There's a lot about, I think, again, these were practices in people programs that existed, but didn't really take front and center focus. But now, to your point, I think two that come to mind is, internal mobility. You're having people resign. Not everyone is resigning because of a culture fit. A lot of people are also resigning because the type of work they do is not what they want to do, or the learning has stagnated, or they want to do something new. They know the organization really well. So how can you actually amplify internal mobility and internal recruitment of folks that potentially they won't go somewhere else because they just wanted a different opportunity to learn and grow? That's not everyone, but that's a good enough subset. I would say the other thing is just flexibility, right? Like employees, there were organizations, this is a kind of a pre-pandemic example, but where, even with organizations or subsets of organizations that refuse to let people work from home because they truly believe you could not be productive from home, right? That's clearly blown out the window now. You can't use that argument anymore. Right. But what level of flexibility are you willing to give employees, right? I think part-time work has not been traditionally, at least in a lot of organizations, the norm, right? It has been very selective, very small level of folks doing part-time. I think those are kind of things that are going to need to have more rethinking on, because there are people that may want to be caretakers part-time and may want to work part-time. And rather than just saying you're out the door, what level of growth?
I think that's true. And also I think just remember, if you're able to have this conversation, you're one of the lucky few that can choose, because many have to go into work for a bunch of different jobs. So I think it's great. I think the one thing I've really noticed is more dads dropping their kids off at school.
Yeah.
I was dropping off my kid pre-COVID. I mean, I wasn't many. I was one of a few dads.
Yeah.
Really, I mean, I was dropping off at Breakfast Club. It was like the 7:30 a.m. drop off. A few kids for sure. But sometimes I would drop off at a thing my wife would say on the way. She'd drop off and then go into the hospital and stuff. It's mostly mums. Now it's got to be almost 50-50.
Yeah,
which
it's
is really
pretty
cool.
much. Yeah, I know. And I guess if we talk briefly about the positive silver lining of work from home, right? Because there's always the two sides to the coin. It's been really cool, like just being around my son, in the mornings. Like I drop him around 8 o'clock to daycare, but if I was going into work, I would have had to leave half an hour early, probably not see him in right in the evening. So it's nice to be able to design my time around some personal commitments that basically helps me keep energized, because we all need something to be energized. So there's a silver lining. It's just hard to balance it out at a macro level for organizations too.
It's awesome, but it took me a long time to adjust, because I was so used to going in I would keep strict 8:30 in the office, 6 p.m. wouldn't leave before, like strict. Suddenly, like they were telling me I couldn't go in. I'm like, and then I'm like having to drop my kids at school because my wife's out working, and I'm like, I felt like I was slacking. I was like starting later, and I was like, and then got into a rhythm, and I'm doing just as much. Like I'm running a company, I've got to be on it. I love it. It's great. But I just had to find a new rhythm.
No, hats off. I mean, I took the month of August off as part of my leave just to be with my son and take care of him. We were actually in London for 2 weeks visiting family then too. But
2020 or 2021?
2021.
2021.
2021. But I mean, I think hopefully, I agree with the 50-50 comment, because I think more and more, maybe it's the pandemic that has made us realize how short life is and how much there is to cherish. Like, my first kid was a COVID baby, right? So I was home already for a year, and then we had the kid, and I'm like, I want to be very involved in his life because I'm seeing him every day. I'm here, and now I have the level of flexibility that potentially, like, we didn't have it at this scale before. So it's really interesting, because I do think, it's going to want, I don't know if there's maybe this is a generalized comment. I have no data, no idea, but, at least from my personal experience and talking to you, like, I think dads want to be more engaged potentially. Obviously, it's a generalized comment. It could vary, but relative to 20 years ago, maybe because they had to be the bread maker, and they had to go in, and they had long hours. It's kind of really cool. I kind of am thankful in some ways.
It's great, but that was also that old school image of a guy. It was like, go to work, support the family. You weren't almost. I remember my dad was, he was out working at a bank, and it was it. He had to go in, and he couldn't leave before a certain time. And my mum was a teacher, but she would part time. And now, now most of every single one of my mates, guys, girls, they want to be, they want to be part of it, so I think that is a really cool outcome from everything, the balance and stuff. So I really like that. Q, awesome. What a lovely place to end. Thank you so much.
I know. No, I wanted to bring out some good too, because the world is, it's definitely a balance, right, of both sides. But excited to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
No, pleasure. You've just got to be, last message, just be positive. I mean, this is how it's going. You only get one chance, and just crack on.
I think, like, be positive, be patient, be empathetic, and just hope for the best sometimes, because you just don't know what's around the corner, and you have to deal with
that. That is true. And I was going to do predictions for next year, but I don't think we could say hands on heart what on earth is coming up this next 12 months. I mean,
there's no. I mean, but the same thing would hold. Just like being patient. I mean, I guess it's the same tip someone would give a new parent, is now how you need to deal with the world. So it's kind of it's funny how parenting has got this whole perspective of, like, dealing with the changing world, for me, all combined and intertwined, because it's happening at the same time for me. So maybe need to reflect and think of some more similarities and put it down on paper or something.
I love it. Thank you very much. Thanks everyone for watching.
Hope everyone recovers fine too, and it was really an honor to be here. Thanks for